Call this regularly scheduled meeting of Bridgewater Town Council to order, and as always, the town of Bridgewater is located in Mi'kma'ki, the unceded and ancestral territory of the Mi'kmaq people, and it is our privilege to be here. There is an addition to the agenda, 10.2, South Shore Transition House Association extension of MOU. So with that, can I have a motion to approve the agenda as amended? Councillor Wynot, seconded by Councillor Newell. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. A few announcements for some folks. A couple big milestones. You'll be getting your Bridge newsletter soon. Digital copy is out, but this year marks the 150th year of the Bridgewater Fire Service. Something we are all very, very proud of. The men and women of our fire service are extremely busy volunteers. I don't know if people know, we reach almost 300 calls a year for the fire service, because it's not just fires. They're going out to accidents. They're going out to, even if someone smells propane, they even go out if there's a cat in a tree. And I believe they have an award every year at the banquet for people who respond to the cats in the tree. So, congratulations to our Bridgewater Fire Service for 150 years. And you'll also notice in the Bridge is an article about the co-op. Many of you will have seen the building going up on LaHaye Street for Bridgewater, our new Bridgewater co-op building that's going up, but this celebrates their 80th anniversary, which is just remarkable to be in business, for any business that long, with the co-op, farmers co-op, and all that they serve. So you'll notice that if you drive along LaHaye Street, that new building going up, that $1 million expansion. So congratulations to them as well. This week, thanks to our own Donna Hatt, Economic Development Officer, and some of our volunteers on our Regional Entrepreneurial Acceleration team, we are hosting, it's called Additive in Action, and this is about additive manufacturing, advanced design, and all the things that go with that. So we are having a day-long event that is going to showcase a number of businesses, advanced manufacturing, 3D metal printing, things like that, as we showcase the talent and opportunities in our area, which coincides nicely with the opening of Exit 12A and things that we can do when we unlock that potential. And then finally for me, we have a startup pitch competition. So if you have a startup or you know someone who has a startup, we are working with Ignite Labs to have a startup competition. The deadline is the end of this month. The pitch will be on April 14th down at the Rosewater Social Club on King Street. The winner will attend the International Network of Michelin Cities Conference in Cuneo, Italy this fall, to be able to showcase that startup on a global stage with a number of other startups from around the world. So that's pretty cool. So somebody with a startup from Bridgewater will be able to present that internationally. So that's pretty cool. So that's the announcements for me. I think Deputy Mayor has a couple.
Too. So yesterday was International Women's Day, and Give to Gain was the theme. Certainly was it was well practiced in our community. It was really, really special to be able to witness. And I had the privilege of going to a few events. The first was I was able to join our Executive Director, Donna Hatt, and a group of women who represent the business community in Bridgewater. We traveled into the city to the Atlantic Business Magazine's Awards, where they recognized 25 women who are named Atlantic Canada's 25 most powerful women. Our own plant manager at Michelin, Rita Casey, Casey or Cassie? Am I pronouncing that incorrectly? One of those two. My apologies, Rita. She was named one of the recipients this year, which was a huge honor. She was very humbled by it, very appreciative that this group of women showed up to support her and to give to gain. She has quite a remarkable story. She started at the plant in Pictou as a tire builder and has worked her way through that company to now be the plant manager, the first female plant manager that Bridgewater has had. And she has also, again, the Give to Gain, created a International Women's Day event at Michelin, where the community is welcome to join free of charge. It's a beautiful evening. This is the third year they've done it. It's decorated, there's a balloon drop, there's music, games and prizes, appetizers. It's a really great event, and women of all ages come together and really enjoy some time together. There are some really great speakers who kind of share their stories and experiences. And Councillor Frigier and I both attended. I think you've been there all 3 years. I've been there the last 2. It is a wonderful event, so watch out for it next year. Congratulations, Rita. Bridgewater is proud of you.
Yes, absolutely. And thanks for attending on our behalf, and very proud of Rita and all she's done, not just in the plant, but into the community, so thank you. Any other announcements? Yes, Councillor Frigier?
Yes, I'd like to announce on behalf of the Bridgewater and Area Chamber of Commerce, we have an upcoming event called Artificial Intelligence in the Workplace. It's a session for business owners and executives with the Simplicity Design CEO, Matt Symes. The date is Tuesday, March 24th. It's an all-day event from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Lunch is included. This will be hosted at the venue Rosewater Social, 673 King Street here in Bridgewater. A little bit about the event. We are able to bring this workshop to the business community with the help of some funding by Workplace Innovation and Productivity Skills Incentive. It's a full day to dive into AI, including lunch, facilitated by Matt Symes. This comprehensive training will provide current best practices, risk mitigating when employing artificial intelligence in a business setting, beginning with practical ground rules regarding AI's use as a co-pilot. Matt will be delving into AI's use in each of these specific parts of a business, from marketing, sales, operations, HR, and leadership. So there's still seats available, and whether you're a chamber member or not, it's open to all. There is a cost for tickets, so you can find out more information, buy your tickets at the Bridgewater and Area Chamber Commerce website if you're interested.
Great, thank you. Any other announcements from Councillor Noel?
Yeah, I'm just shout out to our Evening Post newsletter. So just going through, we got a couple of exciting things happening in town, I noticed. So we've got the Bridgewater Farmers Market with their amazing new logo redesign. Really love that. They've got some markets coming up on March 14th and March 28th. As a friendly reminder to all the folks listening in who have joined us today, we're looking for a new name for 123 Empire Street, the old Bridgewater Memorial Arena. So I know that survey is open till March 31st for folks who have naming ideas. Des Brisay Museum on March 21st, 1 to 3, has a garden planning workshop, Plot to Plant. Gotta try to say that 5 times fast. And then, of course, the town has their Call for Volunteer Award nominations happening until March 13th. So we got a lot of fun stuff going on.
Yep, busy. Great, thank you. Others from council? No, all right, thank you very much. So moving on, we are down to delegations. So before we start, I know there's a lot of people here for the public hearing. So when I call for delegations now, it's the delegation section for everyone who wants to talk, not about the public hearing. There will be a time during the public hearing for people if they want to make comment. So I don't want you to think if you're here for the public hearing, there'll be an opportunity. If you're here to speak to council about something else, this is your chance, anything other than the topic in the public hearing. But we'll start with Craig Flood is here, I think, to give a presentation. So come on up to the microphone, Craig. And just as a reminder for delegations, you have 10 minutes. That doesn't include questions from council and stuff like that. And then because we have 2 slots for 10 minutes that are pre-booked, and then anyone else wants to speak, they have 2 minutes. But the floor is yours. You have 10 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, I'll try to use this. Not always good with technology. So what I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak to you tonight. I'm going to be raising some concerns and issues surrounding the CAP program. I'm also going to be proposing some solutions. Let's see if I do this right. See, I told you it wasn't going to work for me.
Is it turned on?
Yeah, is there, I don't know if it's...
It'll work for you.
There you go.
Which one did you put? Okay, I'll keep pressing buttons. Yeah, no, that's all. We'll give it a go. Okay, I'm always on first thing. basis with the IT person where I work, so it's probably just me. The current situation in Nova Scotia, I'm just going to highlight points. This was more meant for a read-in package for the council. CAP really doesn't work anymore, and problems were started to be identified with the program as early as 2008, reconfirmed in studies in 2011, 2020, and even academic papers were written on the subject stating that it's no longer working. Things to consider. In the province, since in the last 5 years, 57 to 72,000 houses have been purchased, depending on what source you use. In addition, 35,000 plus homes have been transferred between family members. But kind of weird, the cap remains in place. But if you buy a new home, purchase a home as a new buyer, cap doesn't stay in place. Seems a little conflicting there. And given the aging population in Nova Scotia, the number of transfers is probably going to even increase more, which will impact tax rates and bases. Other impacts to the program. Let's see if this will, no, I went back. There we go, okay. The big takeaway here is that the actual tax gap between new home purchasers and generational homes, i.e. those where families raise their families still in those homes or have not been purchased in the last 5 years, that tax gap is not going to close. In fact, every year, that tax gap, the capped assessment, increases. It doesn't come together and will never come together. So that's something to consider. Come on. Doesn't like me now.
If it's not working, just to ask for the slide to be advanced,
Okay,
we can do that.
Next slide. Yeah, that's easy. I can do that. Thanks, Mark. So from a town perspective, how does that impact? Yeah, we have a small tax base here, therefore a higher tax rate. I get it. That's understandable. But because of that higher tax rate, new homeowners are impacted far more in the town of Bridgewater than if they purchased outside the town. So, i.e., my tax raised $5,000 in 1 year after I purchased my home. Outside, it might be $2,000 just because of the lower tax rate. So how does that impact the town? Probably not a first choice for a home buyer. Probably not first choice for somebody building new homes just because the tax rate is so high. And I think Bridgewater is probably sitting at pretty close to zero vacancy rate from what I could find out. Next slide, please. So the tax divide I spoke about earlier, I used my own house as an example. So what I did is I took the previous owner's capped assessed rate and I moved it forward to 2026 using CPI, and I did the same for me at my capped assessed rate. Shown in red, you can see that every year the difference is increasing. It doesn't close, it increases. So capped assessment for new homeowners are going to continue to get greater, so the divide changes between them and generational homeowners. Next slide. So are there options to correct this? Sure there are. I'm not going to talk to option one as I thought about it more. It would probably just shift the tax burden to new construction, and that's the last thing we want to do. Option two, get rid of the cap program by the province. And then municipalities lower their tax rate because it's now being applied to assessed values of homes. That equals the playing field. That's probably the best way forward. The only issue, generational homes are not at market value. And I had this long discussion with PVSC, and I could easily walk around my neighborhood and easily find 5 to 10 homes within a 5-minute walk that are obviously way below market value. So that's something that would have to be addressed moving forward if the province went this route. For the town, there's flat tax rate was discussed a few years ago. Tax ceilings perhaps could be implemented. Rebates are another option. Next slide. So what do I mean by tax ceilings? what I'm suggesting is that based on your assessed value of your home, say 0 to 100,000, you average out what everybody in Bridgewater is paying for their property tax, and that becomes the tax ceiling in that bracket. And you do the same all the way up to the most expensive house you have here in Bridgewater. And then from that, on this slide, you can see how you would come to your tax rate, and that would be applied to the capped assessment. And by doing that, if you're already at your tax ceiling, you just continue to pay what you're paying. If you're below that, you're going to have, your taxes would increase. But what it does do is stops a new property owner paying $5,000 more than the neighbor for the same services and the same style of house and value. What it does, it brings that together, makes it fair, makes the town, next slide. Some of the advantages would make Bridgewater a more attractive place to purchase a home or build homes. And also make it more equitable, the taxes across everybody and all property owners living in Bridgewater. Next slide. Tax rebates. I looked at this and I proposed it, but as I think about it, it would probably fall, how would you deal with new builds when you go through and then you may just shift that to new construction. And again, last thing we want to do, we want to see more homes built, not less. So it might work, but it would be harder to put in place. So next slide, we'll just skip over the advantages because I don't like that option anymore. Next slide. So in summary, I think there are solutions both at the provincial level and what the town can do to fix this problem and make sure that all property owners in Bridgewater are paying similar taxes for similar services. Given the climate and what the provincial government's going through right now, I don't see them making any changes soon, but I could be mistaken. But I think the town could adopt potentially one of these solutions. The tax ceiling approach is quite simple to implement administratively. All the data is available. We have a seminar on AI to work out how to do it, and probably less time than I've been speaking. So I don't think administratively it's a hard sell, but probably public opinion would come into play. There'll be a lot of people who wouldn't want to see their taxes increase, but to them I would say, well, you're underpaying or I'm overpaying. One of those two things is true. We're not paying the same thing for the same house for the same services, and that's incorrect. As I also pointed out, the magnitude of this problem is only going to increase over time. So as we wait, the gap between new homeowners and generational homeowners, that gap in what we're paying in taxes isn't coming together, it's only increasing. So the longer province rates or the town rates, the more painful the solution's going to be. So my suggestion is kind of time now to rip off the Band-Aid. It was probably time to rip off the Band-Aid in 2010, but it never happened. Is it a hard thing to do? Sure it is. Doing what's right is always hard. Otherwise, it would always be done. But as I went through all this and I talked to my MLA, and I've sent emails to the other housing and municipal affairs MLA and those people as well, haven't heard back from them. One thing came to me. It seemed from the provincial level and other levels that it's perfectly acceptable, like in the town of Bridgewater, 1,000+ homes sold in the last 5 years, given on the PVSC's presentation a couple weeks ago. Those property owners are being charged $2,000 to $5,000 more than their neighbors for the same value of home for the same services, and that's acceptable. Because if it wasn't acceptable, then obviously it would have changed. But what I do find acceptable, what people think is not acceptable, is if council or the province was to charge homeowners $200 to $800 a month to correct this problem. This is an unjust practice, unethical, discriminatory, you could call it whatever you want, what's going on now with new homeowners in Bridgewater and across the province. So I think really, and next slide is just a summary of who. Next slide. Okay, maybe not. Oh, yeah, there it is, sorry. Anyways, just who I talked to. But I guess I'm kind of interested to hear your feedback on what I presented today. I understand the high tax rate, I get it, but if you want to make Bridgewater a more sought-after destination, it's a great place to live, don't get me wrong, I'm not complaining about that. I'm not saying cut services or anything like that. I'm just saying, let's equalize the taxes being paid by people, because right now the difference is, it's just huge. We're not talking $500 a month. So studies really irritate me when somebody says they might have to pay $20 or $30 more a month in taxes if we got rid of CAP. I think it'll be more than that given where we are now, but I'm thinking, hey, I'm paying $500 more. I'm paying a third mortgage more than my neighbor. Anyways, I better stop because I don't want to go over my time.
No, thanks, Craig, for that. And I think we've spoken, and I've certainly noted a number of times here that the cap doesn't work. Over 75% of Nova Scotia properties are capped. It's over 82% of property values are capped, which means that under 20% of property value homeowners are carrying a disproportionate load. It's actually a higher percentage of that. They're carrying a disproportionate weight of the tax burden for Nova Scotia, and that's across the province from tip to tip. When the cap came in, it was designed to prevent predatory buying along the coastline of family, next to family homes from people from the States who are looking to buy and build these massive oceanfront properties next to a 150-year-old family estate. That was going to drive the value of that through the roof. So they put a cap on that, and then the cap kind of then suddenly spread to every property, and it is a mess. In my opinion, it's something that has now gone well beyond the point of being something that can be pushed to the side. I think it has to be addressed. I know when I spoke to the Premier, it was one of the things we talked about was we have to have a conversation about the cap to figure out a way to unwind it. I do note that in your slide that's on the screen there, the province would need assurances that municipalities wouldn't use the removal of the cap for a tax grab. Absolutely. When the cap is removed, the tax rate is going to need to go down at a matching rate so that it's not a cash grab. But there's ways to do it.
Yeah, well, I don't think the towns would do it anyways. Maybe they would, but maybe I'm naive, but I think you want to be responsible. So it's not, why would you?
Well, you certainly wouldn't last long around the table if you did that.
Yeah.
Right?
So,
but
and I think the other problem is with the 53% increase in housing pricing in the last 5 years, where cap might have been close before, it is nowhere close since 2020 and probably a few years before that. So the problem is just huge now for new homeowners. And if you take a first-time home buyer, even with the new provincial, low down payment, no GST, can't be the first choice to be here because of the elephant in the room is the tax that no one seems to want to address. And that's my concern. I understand the need to keep people in homes, and I agree with that. I think that's a great principle because it saves us, as taxpayers, saves us money in the long term. It's better for the quality of life of older individuals. But that's a price to be paid by all Nova Scotians, not 57,000 or 72,000. Did the math, it's about $900 million in the last 5 years that those 72,000 people have paid in comparison to their neighbors. And that's just averaging out, it's probably higher than that. So I mean, it's gotten pretty bad now.
yeah.
That has been allowed to go on that long. And if there's anything the town can do, great. I think there are steps the town could take.
Certainly in my role as president of the Nova Scotia Federation of Municipalities, this is on our agenda to have a conversation with. So your presentation is just another helpful tool for us as we try to get the province to have a discussion on what it looks like to unwind the cap, because one of the points you just made is, we want to keep people in their homes longer. it will be impossible for a senior that has a home to downsize.
Yes, that's the other point.
So you have someone who's living in a multi-story, 3, 4, or 5-bedroom house that can't downsize to a 2-bedroom bungalow because the tax bill is going to be $10,000 a year when they're paying now $2,000.
Yeah.
So that's the other piece, right? So trying to keep people in their homes longer is now, they're in the wrong home longer.
Yes, and
Yeah.
that's
So,
exactly
yeah.
it. And I think you're right there. And I think it's also, older people have to realize that higher taxes mean lower price for your home when you sell it.
Yeah.
Because I can go outside the city and buy a home $100,000 more and be paying the same, except I'm paying into equity, not into
Yeah.
pouring it down the drain. Not that I'm saying what we get is doing that,
Yeah.
but effectively, I'm not getting any more equity for that extra $5,000 I'm paying.
No, your points are well taken. I don't know if council has any questions for Mr. Flood? No? So thank you for your presentation.
Okay.
And I know
Happy to
we,
discuss it or help you any way I can.
yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Thanks. Are there any other members of the public that wish to address any items, council, other than the topic that we're going to be dealing with in the second public hearing? Okay, hearing none, we are going to move to the public hearing, so I will suspend the council meeting and call the public hearing to order. I will note that all the statutory requirements have been met. So there is, just for the folks here in the public, because we have quite a few, there is a process to the public hearing, so we're going to hear from our planning staff. And then I will call for comments from the public. We're going to kind of go in an order, so if there's anyone in favor, I'll call them up. If there's anyone opposed, I'll call them up, and then if there are any other comments, council can ask questions. If there are members of the public that have questions, ask them to council, and then we will refer those to staff. That's how that will work. Then I will close the public hearing, we will return to open session, and then we will have a vote. I want everyone to have the opportunity to speak that wants to have the opportunity to speak, but just if it's very similar, if everyone speaking is saying very similar things, I may call for if someone has anything additional to add, just respecting that we could be a few hours if we're just going through that. But if you have something to say, I do want to make sure that you're able to convey it. So with that, I will call up Evan, our planner, to walk us through second reading for the amendment.
Good evening, Council. Tonight I'll be presenting to you on the proposed amendment to the land use bylaw, delivering staff's second reading report. The proposed amendment would transition 283 properties from the single-unit residential zone to the two-unit residential zone. This requires a map amendment to the land use bylaw with no changes to the municipal planning strategy. This is being done to create opportunities for landowners who want to add an additional housing unit. This is a small-scale change, small because we want to preserve the low-density character of these neighborhoods, and because we need to respect the wastewater constraints that the town is currently facing. This change would allow small increases to the population, bringing these neighborhoods closer in line with the population density of decades past, creating opportunities for people to build the kinds of housing their families need, and improve the efficiency of infrastructure and services. Towns and cities across Canada are seeing fewer people per household, requiring more housing units. As these get built further and further out, municipal services and infrastructure get stretched thin. This can become very expensive over time. The two areas encompass 283 properties, or roughly 15% of current R1 properties. These were selected collaboratively between the engineering and community development departments. Area 1, bounded by Empire, Dufferin, High, and York Streets, is part of Bridgewater's central residential neighborhood, ideal for gentle density. It features excellent walkability to services, transit, schools, commercial hubs, while situated within adequate existing infrastructure capacity for small-scale development. Area 2, bounded by Star Street, King Street, and the Centennial Trail, is similarly located within close proximity to key amenities like the LCLC and core commercial areas. This area has seen improvements in local wastewater pumping capacity due to recent offsetting measures. This initiative represents an important step in the town's fulfillment of its agreement with the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, which unlocks $3.3 million in federal funding. The agreement includes 5 initiatives aimed at improving housing affordability and increasing Bridgewater's housing supply. This initiative began with the strategy for the phased removal of R1 zoning, passed by Council in December of 2025. Passage of the strategy directed staff to commence work and bring forward an amendment for the first phase of the transition to R2 zoning. Pictured on this slide is the low-density designation of Bridgewater's future land use map. This designation is part of the town's municipal planning strategy and encompasses both the R1 and R2 zones. Therefore, these changes are in keeping with the low-density designation and are supported by town policy. The MPS, Municipal Planning Strategy, contains 15 objective statements to guide its policy. This amendment specifically comports with 5 of them. It encourages compact development to maximize the town's shared infrastructure. It enables the development of a full range of housing options. It enhances the historic downtown. It improves the pedestrian experience through more housing opportunities within walkable neighborhoods, and helps to preserve and protect the natural environment by relieving pressure on greenfield development. The municipal planning strategy's relevant residential policies also support these changes, with similar policy goals as those listed in the previous slide. The 2-unit residential zone, or R2 zone, would grant these properties 1 additional residential unit as of right. Zoning standards, including height limits and building setbacks from property lines, are identical between the R1 and R2 zones. As such, any property owner choosing to build new housing will be governed by the same rules that currently exist. Across town, only 6% of properties eligible to add a second unit under the 1975 conversion allowance have registered one to date. Worthy of note, only 26 of the 283 properties included in this amendment were built after 1975. This means that 91% of the subject properties, due to the conversion allowance, have always been able to add a second unit. Since April 1st, 2024, Bridgewater has only seen 2 additional units developed within the R1 zone anywhere in town. These numbers indicate that market interest in gentle densification has been, up until now, modest. This amendment, therefore, is not expected to lead to significant new development in the near future. Rather, it may allow small incremental change. These changes will be market-driven, made by individual homeowners looking to meet their housing needs and conform to existing neighborhood characteristics. In Bridgewater, growth in households continues to outpace population growth. This is led primarily by a large increase in senior-led households, with fewer individuals per unit. As such, there's a growing need for more households simply to maintain existing population numbers within established neighborhoods. As part of the Housing Accelerator Fund strategy, public engagements were held across Bridgewater during the autumn of 2025. Information sessions and community engagements were held at the LCLC, HB Studios, the South Shore Center, and the Bridgewater Farmers Market. Across these sessions, a public participation meeting was held on January 14th, 2025. 346 notices were sent to property owners in the affected areas and within a 30-meter buffer. 46 members of the public were in attendance. Feedback from the engagements in the autumn was mostly positive, with popular interest in the possibility of additional dwelling units from homeowners and substantial feedback on the need for more affordable housing stock. Many people spoke of children and aging parents in need of housing. Feedback from the public participation meeting indicated a majority of attendees were against the initiative, with a broad series of concerns. Changes to the character of the neighborhood were identified as the most common concern, with fear of overcrowding and impacts to the sense of community. Privacy, traffic, and on-street parking were similarly identified as key worries held by local residents, while many felt the process to be rushed. While correspondence leading to the PPM saw property values and tax impacts as the highest priority concern, and letters of support cited the incremental nature of the change and the freedom to build on one's property as reasons for their support. Staff have worked to address these concerns with note to the following. A majority of properties feature homes built before 1975 and are currently allowed to construct a second unit as of right. As noted earlier, only 6% have elected to do so, suggesting a very low probability of noticeable change to the built form of the neighborhoods. 1 and 2 unit zones are included in the low density designation, meaning that no dramatic changes to the neighborhood character will be forthcoming. The types of homes currently allowed will not change. Developers or owners will not be able to demolish existing homes to construct triplexes. Setbacks from property lines and height maximums will remain as they are today. No property owner will be forced to change their property. A slight easing of restrictions will allow homeowners the freedom to respond to their own housing needs. Homeowners will not see any direct impacts on their property tax assessments. Over the long term, this change is anticipated to have slightly positive impacts on housing affordability. While there are many While there are many inputs that affect affordability, restrictive zoning contributes to diminishing the availability of new housing units, driving up market rates. Similarly, more housing produces more taxable assets. When these are situated in already serviced areas, this would serve to reduce the overall tax burden on existing residents. All the regulatory requirements for this amendment have been met. Notification to property owners was sent out on December 27th of 2025. A public participation meeting was held on January 14th of 2026. First reading was conducted on February 9th of this year, and the public hearing occurs today, March 9th, 2026. Finally, as with any amendment to the land use bylaw, any aggrieved person may appeal the decision to the Nova Scotia Regulatory and Appeals Board. The appeal period will span 2 weeks should council approve this amendment. It is therefore staff's recommendation that council give second and final consideration to the proposed map amendment of the land use bylaw.
Thank you, Evan. Council have questions from folks? I know this is second reading. Councilor Newell?
In the event that this does not pass, what's the implications with CMHC?
This is, has been communicated to us by the CMHC that this is a key pillar in our funding agreement, so it is likely that, I can't speak to the specifics, but it is likely that our funding would cease.
A substantial amount of our funding would cease.
I believe we have 2 funding rounds to go still, so it would be roughly half the money would be imperiled by such a decision.
Roughly 1.7-ish million, give or take, at least. Okay. Thank you.
So the stat that you gave, so I know that we've heard some concerns to the public of changes in neighborhood, density going from 1 unit to 2 unit with this change. But did you say 91% of the properties in the zone that's being changed already can do 2 units as of right?
Yeah, 91% of the properties, owing to having been built pre-1975, have been able to add a second unit.
Okay. And we've had 2 in the last 2 years.
That's town-wide too. Yes.
In town-wide, so not just in this, so, okay. Just want to make sure I got my numbers right, Councilor Newell.
Yeah, I'm sure there's substantial concern around, people building too close to property lines, building units too high. Do you mind, maybe addressing some of those concerns preemptively of what I think the setback requirements are?
Certainly, yeah. I'll just return to the slide that outlines both the R1 and R2 zones have minimum lot sizes, height limits that are identical. So 10 meters is currently the height limit, 10 meters would be the height limit. Same with front yard setbacks, rear yard setbacks. None of these would change. So if somebody elected to construct a housing unit on their property, they would still have to conform to these that currently govern what can be built.
Other questions from council? No? Hearing none, thank you. I guess we are the applicants, so there's no other. At this point, I will ask if there's, you have a letter to be read, but I'll get to that. Yep. First, are there any people who want to speak in favor of the amendments? Okay, before I call on members of the public opposed, we do have a letter that we've received from someone, so I will ask the acting CAO to read that letter first, and then we'll ask if the public wishes to speak.
This is from Michael and Darby Good. Attention members of Bridgewater Town Council, rezoning of sections of town from R1 to R2 in the sections between Empire and Dufferin from Churchill to Forest Hill. I was in attendance at the NSCC on this subject last month and was not impressed at the logic of the planners. That plan seemed to be to crowd in people wherever the sewer can take away the stuff. That seems logical. However, the modifications were to Empire and Dominion, but not on the streets in between that do the collection. Can these street sewers carry double load? We moved to this section of town because we like how the neighborhood is central to services. We also enjoy how well we relate to each other and how owners care for their properties on a regular basis. Since arriving here, we have seen several houses converted to R2 level and have witnessed a deterioration in how the properties are cared for and how the neighbors relate. A higher density in this neighborhood would deteriorate property appearance and definitely affect our enjoyment. The better result would be to ensure that R1 level is kept in this area and remove the potential for exception that is there now. I would also note that from the meeting we were at NSCC that only one of the 60-plus attendees was in favor of the modification to R2.
Thank you. All right, at this time, I'll ask if there's any member of the public, if they wish to speak. If you want to come up and just introduce yourself. Yep, come on up to the microphone. If you can give us your name so we can put that on the record. And ask that everyone try to stick to a couple of minutes just so we can have time to get to it. Oh, no, that was for the other delegation, so
Is
if,
this a public hearing?
it
I
is.
have 10 minutes to speak?
No, I think is it 10 minutes each?
Yes, I understand, yes.
Okay, yep.
I sent, excuse me, my appearance tonight. I'm renovating my house for the last 4 months, and I haven't had a chance to get a haircut. Welcome, thank you very much for having this diplomatic, democratic opportunity. My name is Hubert Ryan, resident of 22 Glenridge Avenue. I sent an email last night, I'll read it just as quick. 8th of March 2026. Dear Mr. Mayor, councilors of our wonderful town of Bridgewater, good day to you. I bring to your attention many points my dear wife Ann and I have in regards to this zoning changing matter. We state that we are in strong opposition to this zoning change. We strongly feel and recognize this zoning change, if this zoning change passes, it could potentially harm the quiet social fabric to our lives and our dear neighbors in this zone as identified. I'm requesting the council give due consideration to putting this vote on hold until further discussion can take place considering the points that follow. I am requesting the council give due consideration to remove the 1975 R1+1 dwelling of council in 1975, change it to as it should be, R1, one dwelling. If council is not prepared to reverse the immediate above request, then a request of council to consider a plebiscite for the approval, approximately 289 homes affected in this area. I vote, one vote per residence. Let the people be counted. We are opposed to this zoning change for the following reasons. Densification. This could affect the wonderful fabric of our great neighborhood. Town Facebook recently posting upcoming council meeting on the 9th of March at 6 o'clock. I took exception to the comment in this post, gentle increases to the town's housing supply. For the following reasons, I took exception. Citizens within walking distance to services. A, general increases are not the concerns of developers. Public safety, sidewalks. I bring to your attention in this zone, subject to change, that there are many streets that have no sidewalks, my street included. There are a number of streets that have partial sidewalks that come to dead ends. Empire, Dominion for one. Left side going up past the curling club. There are a number of streets that have sidewalks on one side of the street. So residents have to get out and walk across, jaywalk to get to the sidewalk. Annexation. I bring to your attention an important item. I was the project manager for Acadia Construction and Acadia Road Builders in the construction of at least 2 phases in the construction of street services for the Pinecrest subdivision, 1980s and 90s. Please be advised that at least 2 of those phases were on lands that the town of Bridgewater annexed from the county successfully. Why can't we grow like that? A lot gentler, providing citizens with fine-sized lots and nice, quiet lifestyle. Will council give due consideration to that? Glen Allen subdivision, first two R1 phases. Why can't this area be considered for this zoning change? That would keep the sanitary sewage on the east side of the Lehigh River, same side as the sewage treatment plant, Next, public fire safety. I was shocked at the public participation meeting. Your planner, Mr. Nick Brown, for my question regarding, did his planning department have a good consultation with the fire department in this zoning change? Impact to their fire department. Mr. Brown's response was that no, they didn't consult with the fire department as they don't interact with the fire department. He stated engineering interact with the fire department. He added further that the fire department needed funds for anything impacting them, they could approach council. Could we verify that, Evan? That's it. Mr. Brown, I had asked him about did he consult with the fire department, and he said no, engineering deals with the fire department.
I'm sorry, I can't speak for that person.
Okay. That's a matter of fact that I question that I swear by. Where are we here? That poses further concerns to me. If the zoning passes, will a fire station have an addition to house new fire trucks? And if that is so, at what cost to the taxpayers of this town? Further and deeper concern, if this zoning change passes, will the fire department pass a threshold for no longer a volunteer fire department, but a paid full-time fire department, and what cost? Or will the fire department be able to attract additional firefighters, volunteer firefighters? Public policing, safety of citizens. Won't this need to be addressed as same as the fire department concerns, manpower, equipment, sizing the police station? I asked, was this police department in this town consulted with this zoning change? If not, why not? Schools and numbers, I asked, will there be enough room for school children with this growth over time? Was the regional school center consulted? If not, why? Rats, rodents, skunks, sanitary concerns. I notify you that we have seen rats in our part of town only in the last few years. Shocking, as we have lived here in our home for 36 years and no sign of any rodents until recently. I first saw a skunk in my backyard for the first time last year. I stayed away.
Yeah.
He was going the other way. I asked council to give serious consideration to this matter of densification. Could this densification be detrimental due to new residents with a low concern for garbage, waste, composting measures? Composting proper measures. I will look forward to seeing you at the public. I'm here. I ask for your due consideration in my matters presented here. I thank you all for your service to this wonderful town. Best regards, Ann and Hubert Ryan. I'm not over yet. We're 10 minutes, I don't believe. Right?
No, you got a few more.
Okay. Couple of points. I worked for Department of Highways for a number of years as supervisor. Paid my debt to society for 4 years. So with that, I was quite familiar with a right-of-way officer, a gentleman in the valley. He purchased and expropriated highway lands through the valley, largely through the valley when the 101 was being extended down Digby Way. And he did tell me this. He said, Hubert, he said, people's land and property are very precious and close to them. I'll never forget that. Second thing is, I asked Mr. Brown at the open public hearing, I said, if these dwellings are going to be built, it has to meet the National Building Code, go through the engineering department here. He said, yes, all codes and standards must be met. With that, I said, well, developers are quite smart people as well. Who's stopping a developer from getting 2 small C-cans? So there'd be 3 dwellings on this property if this vote goes through, correct? Primary and 2 additional. That's 3 dwellings. That's how I understand this, correct, Evan?
It depends on the pre or post 1975. So,
And we are pre-1975. So it could be my primary and 2 additional dwellings could be on my property or my neighbor's property, correct?
I don't believe you'd be able to do 2 shipping cans, but you could have 2.
I point to that. I said the developers are quite sharp. They have access to engineering capabilities. Who says that a developer could bring in 2 small, medium C-cans, have a structural, mechanical, and electrical engineer stamp those drawings to qualify the work be done to meet the National Building Code of Canada. And Mr. Brown, and be insulated on the inside, and you know how unsightly they are. And Mr. Brown said, yes, that could happen. Am I correct?
I wasn't privy to the conversation, I'm sorry.
But you were present there.
I was.
Yes, okay. You may want to check the records on that, but that's what I swear by. I was asked, and Mr. Brown said, yes, that could be very possible. I want to bring that to your attention, folks. Like I said, people's lands are very precious and privacy, and, you know, noise coming and going, vehicles. Anyway, there's other good neighbors here, I'll let them speak. Thank you very much for your time.
No, thank you. If there's other folks that wish to speak, just go on up. Thank you. And again, introduce yourself.
Good evening, Mayor, councilors, fellow citizens. My name is Sam Ellsworth, and since early 1983, I've lived in a single-family home built, I believe, in the late 1940s. It's located at the northeast corner of Empire and High Streets. This is only the second time in those 43 years that I've felt strongly enough about an issue to appear before council. I did attend the January 14th meeting at the NSCC, and I want to thank whomever was responsible from town staff for taking the time to inform me in writing of that meeting. Quite frankly, the details of what is being proposed are quite revealing. One of the critical aspects of our location in this area was the R1 zoning. In the course of the January meeting, I was to learn that in this particular instance, even that was somewhat misleading. Now, it may be fine for staff to suggest that a very low incidence of citizens, 6%, was suggested, shall avail themselves as of right to construct additional units to a total of, in our case, our lot, 3 per lot. But that's an extremely dicey proposition given the lived experience in the area under consideration. And I will give a couple of examples. One of the criterion cited was the feasibility of the current wastewater sewer capabilities. Despite the recent extensive construction on Empire Street, I have no access to any kind of storm sewer. And I was told by engineering staff there is no intention of providing any in the future. At least 3 of the folks in attendance spoke to me of chronic sanitary sewer problems, 2 of whom reside on Hillcrest in the block between Empire and Dominion. When I asked if there had been any additional laterals installed in the recent Empire Street installations to accommodate the additional loads, the response was to the effect that there had been no speculation. That translates to any additional services would require the reopening of the newly paved surfaces, and the attending traffic disruptions and the town's demonstrated inability to provide adequate communication, oversight, dust suppression, driveway access, cleanup of surplus loose materials, the paving and concrete work, and the reinstatement of painted surfaces on the pavement. So we don't want to go through that again. Another criterion emphasized was the walkability, and we heard it again tonight, of the area. Upon hearing this as someone who walks this area frequently, I was incredulous. As anyone with even a cursory knowledge of this area, surely you must be aware that the area bounded by Empire, Churchill, Dominion, Forest Hill, Ann, and High Streets is pretty much devoid of any sidewalks. And the few that are fortunate enough to have them, they are on one side of the street only, and that, in some instances, is for only a portion of the roadway. I am living on a corner that requires me to jaywalk across ever-increasing traffic just to get to a pedestrian walkway. Anyone attempting pedestrian transit on Ann, Forest Hills, Hillcrest, and Glenridge, the latter 2 between Empire and Dominion, do so at dire personal risk, especially at this time of the year. That aside, when you finally access the paved walkway, in particular the one on the south side of Empire Street, the recent reinstatement is, in a word, substandard. In a recent article in our local paper, the occupancy rate in the emergency department at the South Shore Regional was stated to be in the order of 150% over capacity. Now, those problems certainly weren't created by caregivers nor healthcare generally. Access to family physicians or nurse practitioners is a lengthy process. We watch nervously each year as other municipalities struggle with water rationing and the attending cost of meeting increased demands. We hear of sanitary sewage being diverted due to insufficient capacity. We see the need to allow much more time to make a medical or other appointment on time due to traffic congestion. Can anyone, while applying even a modicum of logic, please explain to me how increasing the core density within town boundaries or even the catchment area of, say, the South Shore Regional Hospital is going to help alleviate these depressing statistics? I could also question the actual need. Newly constructed apartments, there's one adjacent. I think it's called Elation Suites. The developers, for a considerable period, were offering free rent for the first month of occupancy. That offer has since ceased, but they are still advertising vacancies. That's here in town, in an area bordering the designated rezoning area. There are many new vacant units on the periphery of town as well. So why is it felt there's a demand to increase density? There are myriad other items to be considered long before this kind of action should be contemplated. Given recent political developments in Canada, I doubt anything I say here tonight really matters. In my business interests, I have watched various levels of governments predetermine a course of action and then manage a process to see that their desired outcomes were met. Had we had the straw vote that I suggested be taken that night back in January at the NSCC, I don't think it would be an exaggeration to estimate the opposition to this proposal would have registered well into the 90 percentile range. So, in this instance, I sincerely hope the actions of this council prove my assumptions around this being a fait accompli are absolutely wrong. I'll conclude with this. At the center of this initiative is something called the Housing Accelerator Fund Agreement. In essence, some of us here tonight see this as nothing more than an attempt by other levels of government to literally buy us with our own tax dollars. At the very core, and if there is a housing crisis writ large, this is a thinly veiled attempt to correct a problem that bad policy and even worse management created. If the federal government wanted to assist with infrastructure funding, obviously there must be money available, it should have been offered to fund worthy, much-needed, justifiable projects with no strings attached. At the most basic level, the only outcomes one can predict, and they are pretty easily predictable, if the core density of the town is increased, it will be an exacerbation of an already tenuous situation. I would also be interested in obtaining, maybe inputting, additional factual information on the possible impacts of the destabilization, mental anguish, and quality of life aspects that changing a policy that has been in effect since 1975 would bring. Thank you.
Thank you. If you wouldn't mind introducing yourself for us? Thank you.
My name is Wade Seelick, and I live at 220 Empire Street. I've lived there for the past 38 years. Thank you for this opportunity to speak, and thank you for the most recent upgrades that Sam mentioned to Empire Street, which was one of the most potholed streets in town for a very long time. It's now an autobahn of smooth pavement. So reflect on that. I'm an opponent of the removal of the R1 zoning in the area in question tonight, and for many reasons, some of which have been brought up by Sam and Hubert, but I'd like to focus primarily on two. And these both refer to things that Evan brought up in the planning department's report. Number one, what I feel is an inaccuracy of statistical forecasting done in the report. And number two, the negative impact that this rezoning will have on the municipal planning strategy, objective number 10, which I haven't mentioned, which is to improve the pedestrian experience by promoting safe, accessible, and inviting public streets and public spaces. In regards to the inaccuracy of the statistical forecasting in the 101-page report, which I went through, it multiple times mentions with the removal of the R1 zoning, predicted change will be gradual and market-driven. Based on the statistic that only 6% of the eligible pre-1975 properties have converted to date. I do not think that when it comes to housing in our current economy, that the words gradual and market-driven are compatible. If so, there would be no need for things like a housing accelerator fund. My wife and I walk the streets in this neighborhood on a daily basis. We take a variety of routes that include most of the streets in the area, with the exception recently of King Street, for reasons that the mayor and council are painfully aware of. On that note, I would like to thank the council and the mayor in particular for taking a very forceful public stand on the King Street safety issue. Thank you for doing that. One of the things that we've noticed is that many of the homes that have sold in the past 2 years in this area in question have been quickly turned into 2-unit dwellings, I'm sure many unofficially. I see the construction on my daily walks. I see the basements being dug out. I see, yeah. And again, I don't see 2 numbers appearing on the house because it's all very unofficial. My estimates would be that 60%, not 6% of these new purchases in the last 2 years have added either a secondary suite or based upon the number of cars parked on the street in front of these residences and the number of 20-ish aged individuals coming and going, that they now act as some form of boarding house. I understand and appreciate that we have a shortage of reasonably priced housing and a growing population, and that housing prices have increased 50 to 69% in the past several years. And this, in my opinion, is the catch-22 of the Housing Accelerator Fund 3.3 or 1.7, what's left over, $1 million grant, which is, this is now the rezoning proposal is predicated on. That's what this rezoning proposal is predicated on, $1.7 million, nothing more. The need is there. I understand for housing. The 3.3, 1.7 left over is a very nice carrot for the town coffers. But do not underrepresent your statistical forecasting by saying that because the official conversion rate of pre-1975 homes over the past 50 years was only 6%. The future growth will see conversion rates that are gradual, will see conversion rates that are not gradual and are not at 6%. And many of them will continue to be unofficial. We all know that housing market in Bridgewater and Nova Scotia is booming since COVID, and this is the reason for strategies like the Housing Accelerator Fund. This brings me to my second point. If we accept the reality, based on the current need for housing, that conversion rates will be much higher than 6%, especially if we take into account those unofficial conversions, then we have to consider the negative impact that this growth will have on the promotion of safe, accessible, and inviting public streets. We live in a car culture. Getting your driver's license at age 16 is a rite of passage. Owning your first car is seen as social capital as a young person. Having multiple vehicles in your driveway is a sign of social status. For example, 2 drivers in my house, 2 cars. Next door, 2 drivers, 3 cars. Other side, 2 drivers, 3 cars. Across the street, 3 drivers, 3 cars. You get my point. Lots of people, lots of drivers, lots of cars. More units per lot means more drivers, which means more vehicles, all parked on what are most often single-lane driveways, especially in these pre-1975 homes, which means more cars parked on the street. Some of you, whose houses I walk by, see these cars parked in front of your street in these multi-unit homes. I'm aware that we have an active transportation plan and a bus route. But if I live in Bridgewater and say work at Walmart or Canadian Tire, no bus. I have to take the dangerous journey across the overpass, which MODL has already looked into, and consider that to be very dangerous. If I work outside of town, no bus. If I want to go to the beach, no bus. I usually see an empty town bus go by my house, but I do see lots of cars driving the street and lots of cars parked on the streets because the single lane driveways are full. I do also see lots of people walking, many of them children. I see lots of elementary and junior high age children walking to and from school. I see senior high students walking down to the old arena to catch the bus to Parkview. I see preschoolers from the daycare out for their morning stroll. I see groups of children walking up the street to go to the YMCA the after school program. More units on these lots means more vehicles, which means more dangerous crossings, particularly for these young people. And that's on the streets that have sidewalks. As my neighbors have already mentioned, many do not, many have to cross streets. It's a mishmash of sidewalks at best. And then on the streets that have no sidewalks, like you walk on Glenridge, a multitude of cars parked on the streets, which you now have to weave in and out of. Then you add snowbanks, young children, you can picture it. And then what they have to do, if they can get to a crosswalk after crossing the Autobahn of smooth pavement, there is no flashing strobe light unless you're at the newly installed ones down by the elementary school. If you've recently tried to cross High Street, I don't know if any of you have, at the top of Empire, have you? Okay, then you can picture this quite clearly. So one of the busiest streets, lots of cars, lots of transport trucks delivering goods. On that crosswalk, which the groups of young children that I've just mentioned, elementary school children, preschoolers out for their stroll, after daycare children walking. There's not even a painted sidewalk, is there? No painted sidewalk. After the paving was completed on High Street and Empire Streets this past summer, and other sidewalks, crossings have been painted, I contacted the engineering department to point this omission out. I just thought they forgot, they missed it. You know, things happen. The reply that was, and I quote, "It was too late in the season to paint it, and it would have to wait until spring." It would have to wait until spring. I almost went out one night and painted it myself with a roller. I did. I was that frustrated. In closing, I would like to state that to get to the premise of the rezoning proposal, and I see it every day, and I understand the town is growing. We need more housing. 3.3, 1.7 million is a nice carrot. But in summary, the rezoning proposal is flawed in regards to its statistical forecasting. Market-driven housing growth today will be anything but gradual. It will be anything but gradual in the future. That is why there's a housing accelerator fund. That's why it exists. Unless we acknowledge this, the unplanned growth that will occur, both official and I'm more concerned with the unofficial, of second and third units on lots in this area, will, in my opinion, lead to unsafe streets, streets that are not accessible, and streets that are not inviting. How can we expect this type of growth to produce safe, accessible, inviting streets when major intersections, like the one at the top of Empire and High Street, that has multitudes of children crossing it every single day, multiple times a day, in busy traffic, after 5 months, still doesn't have a painted sidewalk? Thank you.
Is there other folks that wish to address council on this item? Yeah.
Sure, I have a question. One thing that stood out to me since I was talking about property taxes, if you add another building to your property, how do your taxes not be affected? How is that possible?
Yep.
Yeah, I'd like to have
Yeah,
that.
come up to the microphone though, Evan, just because we have a live stream, so.
Yeah.
So to answer the question, that the assessment will not be done just for rezoning. If you choose to build something new, then they will conduct a new assessment and factor in those new costs that
Okay.
contribute to the property's value, but a rezoning is itself insufficient for a new assessment to
No,
transpire.
okay, I misunderstood.
Yeah, no, it's a good, no, I'm glad you asked the question. It's a good
Plus,
question.
if you did introduce what I proposed, then they wouldn't be able to afford a second car, because I can. So that would cut down on vehicle traffic.
Is there anyone else that wishes, Tommy, yep? Everyone knows who you are, but please introduce yourself.
Probably not everyone. Hi, I'm Tommy Mailman. I live at 15 Forest Hill Road, and I've been there 48 years. I didn't really plan anything tonight, but I did make a few comments that I felt, oh, and before I forget, Mr. Ellsworth was up here this evening. He neglected to tell everyone that he habitates a former mayor's house, His Worship Glenn Porter. Am I right, Sam? That's right, thank you for living there. Anyway, I did make a few comments. I have just simple one question, and I want the council to consider, and that is, I wouldn't call it gerrymandering the borders, but my question would be, when it was brought to my attention, the boundaries of the recommended change. Why did they select that area? And if it's so inviting to council and this new word of densification, why wouldn't they broaden the boundaries and encompass more houses in more areas or more areas within the town? If it's good for Forest Hill Road to have an R2, then it should be good for Wiley Smith subdivision, or maybe even in the Glen Allen subdivision. And that would be the first question I would have for the planners as to how they chose the periphery of the suggested lots. The other thing I just wanted to make a comment, I think the devil is in the details in terms of when you sit down to decide. And I noticed, which I heard tonight for the first time, that in the eligible homes from 1975 back, only 6% chose to develop a second unit. I think that's right. And my answer to be that was the 51 years of research from 1975 to the present day, and only 6% of those people chose to do something that by right they could do. That tells me that they don't want it, and that's why they didn't do it. That in itself, I think, speaks volumes, that if it was advantageous for any reason whatsoever, other than the town garnering increased revenue or whatever, that to me is an incredible piece of research. They simply had 51 years to develop an apartment in the basement, whatever, and 91% of those people chose not to do that. Mm-hmm. And that tells me, you know, that in itself is a big consideration that I hope council thinks as they move and make a decision. That's basically it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tommy. Evan, do you want to maybe talk about some of the R2 zones that are elsewhere in the town? Because I think this isn't the only place that has that in the town.
Yeah, a number of folks have mentioned the Glen Allen area as a potential suitable other candidate. At present, much of the Glen Allen area is R3, so a higher level of density is permissible around there. So this would not be meeting that level. It would be one below.
Okay.
Why these areas were selected, it was done painstakingly between engineering and community development, largely with concern for wastewater capacity. A number of our pump stations are at or very close to their total capacity. And why not the whole town? Because of total wastewater plant capacity. We are very mindful of the fact that this is a major consideration, and so we do not want to take any major steps without proper care and consideration. The strategy for the removal of R1 zoning, which came to you in December, outlined the plan by which we would indeed roll this out across town over time. Why these areas were selected as the first stage of that, owing to wastewater capacity.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to make sure there's anyone else who wants to speak first before you come back, but yeah, is there anyone else that wishes to?
I have a question. Do I need to?
Yeah, if you don't mind, because this is live stream, so we want to make sure that folks watching, they can hear you.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Jack Sembalisti. I'm on Glen Ridge Avenue. So it was the intention to get rid of R1 zoning in the town of Bridgewater? Because that's kind of what it's sounding like.
Mm-hmm. Yep,
So it is. Okay, so nowhere is going to be R1 anymore.
correct.
Okay. Yeah, my concern, I guess, moving from R1 to R2 in our neighborhood, I've seen it in other places that I've lived across Canada, that when you increase the densification in an area like, say, Glen Allen, where you've got, the developer has a chance to design the densification, it works out well, because it's all designed and it's fit together, and it looks okay. But in an area like ours, where we've got a mishmash of different housing designs, different lot sizes, as people move out of the houses and other people move in, developers, whatnot, want to add different buildings and different structures, it turns into a bit of a ghetto. And that's my main concern.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? If not, sir, you had another question. Did you want to come back up? Did you have another question or comment?
Just a follow-up from Evan's comments there, if it could, Mr. Mayor and Council. My understanding is the first two phases of Glen Allen subdivision are single R1 dwelling units. For example, former Mayor John Hurdle, God bless him, lived on, I think, Hopkins Drive, in a brick house. I think it's Hopkins Drive. That's a single-family dwelling. That's an R1 zone, which has lot sizes sufficient to hold this R2 zone as well. You're aware that the first two phases that were built there, then beyond the hospital becomes R3, I believe. But even past Hollingsworth it becomes R3. But up to Hollingsworth Drive from Aberdeen to Hollingsworth is R1. Just want to clarify that.
Yep.
And the lot sizes are sufficient to do exactly what you're looking at doing on this side of the river.
Yeah,
Am I correct in that?
yeah, that older section on Glen Allen is R1, and then the newer section is all R3.
Yeah, it's past
R3.
Hollingsworth.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's quite a lot of homes in that could qualify for this.
yeah, so the goal will be eventually they would be also going through this.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, is there anyone else that wishes to address council? I want to make sure anyone who does gets an opportunity. Yeah, yeah, come on.
Craig Flood. So we heard about an apartment in the bottom of the house, an existing structure. Is that actually considered another building? I would assume it's not.
No.
No.
No, it would not be considered another
So
business.
somebody.
Yeah, do you just want to come up, Evan, just so
Sorry.
you-
I'm getting you up and down.
That's all right.
Wanted
Let's
clarification.
get his steps in.
Yeah, if you were to build a basement suite, say, that would not be considered a separate structure, but it could be a separate dwelling unit that is governed by certain things, like you have to have separation and that sort of thing.
Yeah,
So that's all governed by the building code, but it would not be a separate building.
Okay.
Just a reminder that if council wants some answers to some of the questions they've heard tonight, if you were tracking them, you can ask staff
Yep.
if you've got any detailed
Yeah, I just-
questions.
I'll make sure if the public has anything else to add, just tell me you want to come back down. Should have brought your scooter.
Roads are too rough. Just a point of clarification, Your Worship. I'm confused. Are there other R1 areas in the town? If this passes and the areas that are suggested move to R2, will there be other areas? Because someone said in Glen Allen that there are existing R1s. So there are other areas in the town that will be in R1.
Yes, there's our R1 areas now, I'm just looking at staff, but they will also, the plan is eventually that they will also go through this.
Okay, so,
Yeah,
but at this time, there'll be other R1s in town.
yes, we're phasing this change in. Yeah, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, if there's no other comments or questions from the public, I just want to see if council has any questions for staff or any comment, Deputy Mayor?
There was a comment regarding developers, and that obviously, when they're developing, they're trying to maximize every dollar that they're investing into a property. Do we typically see developers using this approach where they buy a house and add a unit? It doesn't seem like a good way to maximize an investment, but do we see it very often?
Sorry, I can't speak specifically to the things that we've seen in regards to developers buying up R1 or R2 properties. I know it can be done and has been done. A number of people create rental units in basements, or a number of people care to do so for family members, that sort of thing. So I don't know if anybody on staff else would like to reply to that.
Generally speaking, when developers have bought, say, an R1 zone property, they've then applied for a rezoning to have a higher density and for a larger development. Pardon my voice. So.
And that's a separate process that they have to go through anyway.
That's a completely separate process.
Yeah.
That's generally on a property-by-property basis. If they're buying an R1 and say want to go to an R5 or an R6, then they would need to request a policy amendment as well as the land use bylaw amendment. But where this is, R1 zone properties are within the low density designation, which is the policy. That low density designation contains both R1 and R2 zoning. So it's a rezoning to go from an R1 to an R2, no policy change required.
Did you have a follow-up, Deputy Mayor?
Oh, no, I just wanted to make sure that
Okay.
that would require a different process outside. It would not be an as-of-right.
Correct,
process,
yeah, and that process remains, yeah. I don't know, yep, Councillor Wynant?
Sorry, Jessica, this one's going to be for you.
The key is to wait till they sit down and then.
Well, she's bringing her computer now, so.
Yeah.
This is for my clarification, but also for public as well. We've identified the 1.7 million, and that's at jeopardy if we vote against. Could you briefly describe what that looks like if that 1.7 doesn't come through? What programs, what initiatives we're working on that could go away?
Some of the funding is being used can either be used for housing-related infrastructure or community-related infrastructure. So the funding for Generations Active Park, accessible playground, we have some earmarked for that. The funding, some of the funding for wastewater upgrades on Jubilee Road would be at risk. I'd have to dive into the budget to provide you with more information on that, but those are some of the larger ticket items that are right now we have discussed with council and proposed would be covered by.
So this spills out
It spills out beyond
just
Yep,
housing.
it does.
This is purely community. Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Deputy Mayor?
Another comment that I heard was about properties that are quietly being turned into multi-unit and maybe the town is not aware of them. Does removing this kind of red tape, and you may not have this information because I'm really putting you on the spot, but is there any research or have you read anything that tells you when you remove the red tape, does compliance increase? Or do they continue to hide that because they're afraid of taxes or?
I mean, I think there's a variety of reasons. I don't have, that's a suggestion of a significant amount of illegal suites that I have no knowledge of, would need to, we have uncovered here and there where someone has created a suite, but we've also seen a shift in housing to more roommate situations, to boarding houses, which are allowed up to a certain amount, as well as to more multi-generational households. So just the number of cars in a driveway doesn't always automatically suggest that there is a second, fully separate second suite there. There could be a separate living area that would not be fully separated. The house would still have to be fully open to each other. So often that's in a multi-generational household where maybe they have somebody living in a basement apartment, but it's not a full apartment. It's just a living space. So there sometimes are those situations. So I'd have to go back to our building inspector and to our development officer and really look at some of that data. But I'm not aware of a 60% conversion.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
Councillor Brashear?
Just looking at proposed development and what we have in the area on this side of the river, thinking about the old golf course and Phase B. Just wondering, just hypothetically, say 5 years out that they come, I'm not sure the number of units in that request, but does town staff have any concerns with that impacting this particular approval of 283 units and changing that zoning for sewer sanitary waste with any other future apartment developments on this side of town?
So the ones that are known and in progress were all part of that consideration. And again, if a secondary suite is being built, say in the backyard, if it needs a second set of services, that the permission for those water and sewer services is also part of the process. It's not guaranteed that if it can't tie into the existing plumbing of the house so say a basement apartment or a small secondary suite in the backyard that ties into the existing laterals, if it needs a second set, there's no guarantee that they will actually get that permission based on the wastewater situation. Correct, Matt? Mostly in this general area for the 283, it's generally, that's why this area was chosen first, because it's high likelihood that they would. But there's also a few, there can only be the 2 buildings on the lot. There are other, and an accessory unit in the backyard would be governed by the accessory structure section of the land use bylaw, which is still bound by the same zone standards, but it's not.
They still have to go through, it's sort of case by case.
They still have to go through all the,
Right.
and that was discussed when we brought the strategy forward.
Right.
There's still, similar to the ADU work that we brought forward, you still have to, on a case by case, property by property, make the final determination if they can do everything that the zoning allows. And that's not every property can do it.
Yeah, so you still have to be able to have wastewater capacity, you still have to meet all the minimum, all the requirements, all the setbacks, all those things are all exactly the same.
Yes.
None of those are changing. Height limit hasn't changed. Property setbacks haven't changed, so. Other questions from?
Ask a point of clarification. Just when you would reference what potential cuts might be in place if that $1.7 million isn't given. So am I to understand that that money's already in the budget? The $1.7 million that you don't yet have is already in the budget to be spent? You seem to be able to name off a number of fairly major things, wastewater type things that seem to be important that you don't yet have the money for, but you're counting on.
I can clarify. The 2 big projects that I named, we have the funding for from the first 2. It's unclear if they would claw that back or simply not give us the remaining 2. So the pieces, the money that we have received, we have received 50% of the grant to date. It is unclear if they would claw back any of that, which would impact those particular projects. And I only know the ones, I can speak off the top of my head because those are the ones that we have the money for and are in the capital budget right now. But it could potentially put those at risk if they choose to pull all the funding or simply the future funding. And they've been unclear on that.
That would include the contribution to SODA that was contingent on getting the Housing Accelerator Fund additional funds, so that extra money wouldn't be available for SODA, as an example.
What would SODA be?
So Shore Open Doors Association, yeah. So you can come and ask your question, but our time for the public input, I did ask if people had more questions, so, yeah.
If I'm understanding this correctly, there's $1.7 million remaining that's for non-assigned projects?
For projects that were through multiple phases.
Okay, so if we're talking about safe neighborhoods, wouldn't one of the first top priorities be sidewalks? If we know there's sidewalks missing, shouldn't that not be project earmarked at a high priority for sidewalks rather than, I heard a park, and what else was involved?
Wastewater upgrades.
Wastewater upgrades, understandable.
Yeah.
But would it not be sidewalks before a park? For the safety of those children that Mr. Seelig spoke about that travel up and people who get 2 new additional units in their backyard. Glen Ridge Avenue has no sidewalks. You want small children, shouldn't we go on sidewalks first? Infrastructure, like up in front and center, sidewalks? Thank you.
Other questions from Council Deputy Mayor?
Just something that I found interesting and has kind of led me to a question. So I had considered this on my own property, and I had considered it as a means of potentially generating an income to allow me to maintain my home and the affordability of my home as a single person. The cost of building was too much. It didn't work out. The dollars and cents didn't work. So then I've also considered if I built a garage with an apartment above it, my daughter who can't get into a home herself could come home and live in the house, and I could live in the apartment. Seems like a great solution to me. And in thinking of this, I thought, isn't that interesting? There were 5 people and 4 cars in my home 3 years ago. And even by adding a unit, I would be down at that point to 2 people on the property and 1 car. So how many people could actually live in my house without me building another unit? Is that by square foot?
We don't cap and we don't define family. So we
Okay.
don't define how many people can live in your home.
Okay, would there be a fire code or anything like that?
There are building standards,
Okay.
and so the building standards bylaw, has lots of standards around, how many bedrooms, et cetera, but we don't say that only this many people can live in this whatever house. So, but the building standards do need to be met. I'd have to pull up the building standards bylaw to give you any further granular information on that.
Okay.
I was thinking the same thing. So we had 5 people in our house, 4 cars. We're now empty nesters. If I convert my garage to an apartment and there's 1 person living in that apartment, then we're still down 2 people and probably down 3 cars. So
I also can't meet the setbacks, and I live on the corner of Pink and Red, so I have no wastewater capacity, so tell my neighbors.
Other questions from?
Maybe just a question about the sea containers, or I don't know if you're prepared to speak to that, but we have a land use bylaw around shipping containers, and I believe.
So I can't, I
Okay.
have to pull the information up,
Yeah.
but in the land use bylaw section, sorry, I'm just trying to get to the right page because I had opened
I
it.
believe it says they can only be used for temporary.
Yeah, so section
Storage.
3.1.7 governs accessory uses, buildings and structures, which is what would govern a secondary suite in the backyard. And it has to be on a foundation. So just, plopping down a sea can typically would not work. If it was put on a foundation and fully cladded, meets building code, which a sea can, it takes quite a bit for that to meet building code. It would have to meet the code of a dwelling. And I do believe under temporary structures it would not be allowed. But again, I don't want to speak out of turn, and I need to.
3.1.23 says it can't be used for habitation.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Struggling to get there.
So,
Okay.
Thank you. So
Yes,
cannot be used for habitation. Okay. Thank you. Other questions from council? Okay, before I.
There's one in the back.
Yes. Yeah.
Hello, I'm Carolyn Banfield. I live on Hillcrest Street. And I've been listening intently, and this is more a comment, I guess. So basically, we have probably no choice in changing the fabric of the houses that we bought in the community that we bought them in, so that the town can improve other things that they need the money for, when the area that you want to alter the zoning to is inadequate for what you're proposing. I would say, and I'm not exaggerating, I've been in the house I'm in for 18 years, and the town is pumping the sewers out and digging up lawns probably 6 or 7 times a year on that street. The sewer system is totally inadequate for the housing that's there. The sidewalks are totally inadequate. We had a funeral this week that you could hardly get one car down the street. And let's increase the number of cars on the street. Like, it doesn't make sense. I feel that it isn't meeting my needs. If this changes, and I think a lot of people will feel that way in the community that we live in, because it is a community unto itself, that maybe the municipality looks better. But I'm very disappointed in the town if this goes through. Extremely. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, any other questions from council? Okay, I will just say before I adjourn the public hearing, we move back to open session. I do appreciate everyone taking the time to come out tonight. I know it's not always easy to come up, speak in front of council, and there's a bunch of cameras on you, and so I do recognize that is not always easy. So I do appreciate you all coming out and taking the time to express your opinions on this, and so thank you for that. If there's no other questions from council, then I will adjourn the public hearing. We will reconvene the council meeting and return to our session 5.1. So we are now on the item of the public second reading, and so open the floor for some discussion or comments. So I'll just make a couple of comments. You're all right when you talk about wastewater constraints. So, part of that means that the likelihood of a lot of change on some of your streets is next to nil, because there just can't be, there won't be an approval for someone to add a unit because there isn't the capacity. We heard tonight that 91% of the units of the properties in question can already do 2 units, and they don't do 2 units. So there's this expectation that over the next 5 or 10 years, we're going to see, on the 283 properties, 283 new dwellings. The data doesn't really support that. As we now know, in the last 2 years, we've only had 2 applications for 2 units across the town. So that's not just in your area, that's across the town. And so when staff talks about gentle increase between the wastewater capacity and, again, the fact that 91% of these properties could already do this and don't do it, it really is going to be very gentle, especially when you look at the cost of building. It's an option that's out of reach for most. But I do want to go back to what we talked about when Mr. Flood came up, and we talked about the cap and the inability for some people to afford to downsize their house. I know that no one here spoke in favor of this, but I have talked to a few seniors that are living in a very large house who also have adult children that can't afford to buy a house. And so the option to be able to put a smaller secondary dwelling on their property for them to move into, while then transferring their primary residence to their adult child, is something that is a concern for seniors who, if they move, they're going to get taxed out of their house. But again, they're living in a multi-story house alone that's too large. So that's something I think a number of us have heard around the table, is this how do I downsize my house without risking unleashing the cap, if you will, and paying $10,000 or $12,000 in property tax because house prices are out of reach and taxes go along with that when the cap's off. So I don't know if that gives you any comfort to know that between wastewater and, again, that 91% that could add a second unit, that 2 in 2 years, again, not just of those 283 units, but across the R1 zone, in R2 zone in the town. So I hope that helps you understand that we're not going to see this massive influx of redevelopment of your land. And as Evan pointed out, a developer also just can't come and tear down a house and put up a triplex. That is also not allowed through this policy. So there are some checks and balances. The crosswalk painting up on High Street, you're not the first person to mention the timing of some of the painting. This has been kind of the frustrating point for many of us around the council table. Is there one company that does line painting in this end of in the province, or a couple? Like small town Nova Scotia, we're kind of at the mercy of who the company is that paints the lines for us. And so when they get to us last, or we have construction that is later in the season, or they miss something, then we got to wait till they circle back, unfortunately. Yeah, we're not really open for Q&A, but I want all that to say, they need to be painted, and it's going to be painted, and we continue to work with these contractors to say, the painting has to happen sooner. I think we pre-approve the painting sometimes, and it doesn't happen sooner. And then for the sidewalks, we do build sidewalks. So working on the accessible playground in Glen Allen doesn't mean we don't build sidewalks. So council hears you on that, and we'll have some conversations around, because we do a lot of sidewalk improvements throughout the town, and so we can have a conversation about what that looks like and where those, what are the options for the streets that don't have, if there are options for the streets that don't have sidewalks. But I just wanted to say that to hopefully give you a little bit of peace. I don't know if any other one, Councillor Caldwell?
I'd just like to first of all thank everybody that came out and for all your comments. I understand them all and I hear them all. However, I do support the changes as proposed. I live in a neighborhood that grants these additional units as right, and I wouldn't live anywhere else. I love the neighborhood. I think ultimately, although I understand your concerns, I think ultimately they will be unfounded. My neighborhood is amazing, and I think the concerns you raised will ultimately be unfounded. I think that this proposal balances our infrastructure needs, our infrastructure constraints, our housing needs, finances, and fairness. And I also think there will be a low level of uptake on this. It'll be very gradual. I'm very confident in that, just based upon what's happening in the rest of town and in my neighborhood. But if in these neighborhoods we're talking about, even if we can get a few extra say in-law suites where people can live affordably, comfortably, safely in a time when we have a severe housing shortage. We're in a crisis, and we have studies to show that. Then I think these changes will be worth it.
Thank you. Other Deputy Mayor?
I wanted to kind of address something that I think probably sounds very much like we're talking out of both sides of our face, because we're talking about housing accelerator funds, but we're also talking about constraints. And we are in a push-pull where we have a need to accelerate housing for all of the reasons just mentioned, because there are people who don't have anywhere to live and because we need to grow. And at the same time, we're saying that we have these constraints that we need to address that aren't going to allow the housing. So it sounds like we're saying we're trying to accelerate housing, but don't worry, it's not actually going to happen. We are actually in a push-pull, and I can imagine how it sounds to the public, but it is legitimate. So knowing that we need growth, that it's essential to any community, and I mean we're looking at tens of millions of dollars that need to be invested in our wastewater system, with 3,914 assessment accounts. The more assessment accounts we have, or if there are more units and the density increases and the assessment goes up, that spreads that burden over more people. And that is essential, because the people paying taxes in Bridgewater right now cannot carry that burden alone. We have to find ways to make sure that it is spread among as many people as possible. So we have to focus on realistic and meaningful ways of increasing density, which means putting control of your property in your hands so you can use it the way you need to. If that means bringing family home, or it means adding a unit to your home so that you can stay in your home That's a way of doing it without seeing, 100-unit apartment buildings going up and trying to deal with the pressures of the wastewater from something like that. So that's, I don't know if that better explains that we have this push and pull that we're really trying to address, and that we're trying to make sure we don't burden our taxpayers with any more than we have to. We're all taxpayers too, and we know we can't take another hit. So we're trying to find a balance, as Councillor Caldwell said. We're trying to find a good balance that's not going to, growth is essential. We want to make sure that it's done well and that it doesn't have major negative impact. And this is probably one of the ways that can best be done. It is one of the most gentle ways that we can do it.
Thank you. Other comments or questions? Someone prepared to make a motion? Councillor Newell, thank you.
Again, I truly, to the bottom of my heart, appreciate all of you coming out. I'm speaking as the youngest councillor around this table. To be honest with you, I come at this from a very different perspective. There's not a day that goes by that, that I don't talk to, whether it's my peers or parents or grandparents of their kids that want to remain in this town, move to this town, stay here. They can't do that right now, or it's very difficult. There were comments, which I heard, around having buildings put, having people live on the outskirts of town. Great, like that's part of the solution, but the reality is that we also want people living closer downtown so that they aren't driving as much. We talked about traffic congestions. The reality is the majority of our traffic congestions are not people living in town. They're the 30,000 cars that come into this town every day to do things. And we, as a council, are working on addressing those problems. But truly, this is something that, whether it's been in Ottawa or Edmonton or Montreal, I wish I had some smaller communities, this is a move that is about increasing access and affordability. For Amit is primarily a different generation, but it is something that I truly believe in, I have to believe in. And with that said, Your Worship, I move that Town Council for the Town of Bridgewater conduct second and final reading on chapter number 236, a bylaw to amend the land use bylaw to transition 283 properties from R1 single unit to R2 2-unit zoning in priority areas to enable gradual density increases while respecting infrastructure constraints to allow landowners the opportunity to add an additional residential as a right and to improve efficiency of infrastructure and services as contained in Appendix A in document number 23-110N dated March 9th, 2023.
Thank you. Seconded by Deputy Mayor McDonald. Further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you again, folks, for coming. I know it's, again, not easy to come out and share. Just a reminder, because I know when people hear as of right, they think it just means you can just do it. It doesn't mean you can just do it. You still have to go through a process. And again, if there's no capacity, then you're not going to be able to do it. So again, I just know, because some people have actually said as of right, no permits. No, as of right means still you have to go through the same permitting process and all that stuff. So I just want to make that clear. Anyway, thank you. Our next item is we have the minutes from February 23rd, regular meeting and public hearing. Any errors or omissions with those? Hearing none. Motion to approve the minutes. Thank you, Councillor Newell, seconded by Councillor Wynot. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. Down to correspondence for action, 8.1, United Way renewal request for free Bridgewater transit passes through the free transit pass program. I don't think we have anyone presenting on that, right? It's just the regular request. As we know, the United Way is requesting 10,000 free transit passes again this year. So it does require council's approval. I don't know if there's any discussion on that, or Councillor, why not?
I'll make
Sure.
a motion that Town Council for the Town of Bridgewater agree to provide a total of 10,000 free passes, which is equal to total passes in 2025, 2026, to the Lunenburg County Ways Free Transit Pass Program for the fiscal year 2026, 2027.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Newell. Discussion?
Sorry, a little bit late to the show here.
Yeah, sorry.
I know that Mr. Graves has come and talked to us about the impact of that, and I'm wondering if it would be worthwhile having that conversation again before 10,000 passes is a lot. Just wondering if we could get some feedback on where they're going, who they're serving, are they being used, are a bunch of them being returned every year? Just to have that information before we approve a significant number of passes.
Yeah, he did note in the corresponding document that they do have a redemption rate of 91.75%. They've distributed so far to the end of January 2026, 7,010 passes, a 20% increase over last year. Top 6 users are Souls Harbor, John Howard, Soda, YMCA Outreach, Schools Plus, and the ARC, which account for 95% of that usage. But it might be nice to have Mr. Graves come and have another discussion. I know we talked about this morning. I know sometimes the rationale is 10,000 passes, it doesn't really cost you anything because the bus has to run anyway. That's not really a logical explanation. The example I use is you shouldn't be charging for food because it doesn't cost anything for your restaurant if it's empty anyway. Well, yes, it still does. It still costs money. And so it's, 10,000 passes may not equal $20,000, but it's not nothing. So I certainly think I really think it should be an annual check-in if you're going to ask for 10,000 passes, but we didn't ask Mr. Graves to come. So whether you need to wait to talk to him to make the decision or vote on it now and still have him come and explain it, I leave that to council.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on, thanks for bringing that up, because I know there's certain times a year, whether it be around the Christmas break or coming up next week, we have free transit for students. So even if we could have staff from our transit to report on, are we at a situation where the bus is full and we can't accommodate riders? That would be interesting to know, especially around those free ridership weekends leading up to Christmas and so on. I think providing, free passes, free ridership is a great thing. But as you both mentioned, knowing the numbers and knowing from transit staff, is there situations where the bus is full and we can't accommodate? I'm just wondering if that's possible to know from data on our side.
We can always get that information, for sure.
We could also table the motion if that was the will of council.
Yeah, we can do that. I have questions coming out of the provincial budget. There are cuts to public transit. My understanding is the trip funding has been eliminated. Kind of looking at Jessica, sorry, I'm not like death stare over there. Even the transit's not even your fault. It's not even your, it should be looking at Matt, but Matt's looking away. But there's 20% reductions in some transit funding, and then that trip funding, which I think we use, we accessed on we use trip funding for something. There's too many acronyms, I can't remember what we use and what we can't use. Or is that the one we're not eligible for because of our age of our transit?
Well, NS trip funding is for when you're starting up a transit system. So we used that. That's part of what made ours successful. We used that for the feasibility study and then used it for the pilot phase. It's the PTAP, so the Public Transit Assistance Program. There's been a slight reduction in that funding. It wasn't eliminated, but the NS trip to start more transit systems was.
Do we get the Strategic Community Transit Investments Fund or the Community Transportation Assistance Program? Do we know if we get that, any of those?
That's public transit. We're a public transit fixed route system. So a community system like Lunenburg County Wheels would suffer from not being able to access that funding. The grant, we did get confirmation that the grant that we are currently for the extended hours and Sunday service, we're in this 4-year multi-year grant program with the Community Transit Nova Scotia Community Transit Organization. That funding is safe and secure. That has been confirmed that we are still on track to receive that this year, and that grant itself was not cut. But the other funding for community transit was impacted, but we're not eligible for that.
Okay, that's helpful to know. Thank you.
Just a couple of other things. I mentioned to you this morning that I've been offered free passes while standing at the bus stop. We don't know how they're being accounted for. There's no process in place, right? We just give them to them and they're distributed to organizations. How do we know?
Yeah,
what's
correct.
used
United
and
Way
what's used from?
distributes them, yeah, we give them the United Way and then they're the distributor. So when you mentioned that this morning, so the deputy mayor was mentioning while waiting for the bus, someone said, I've got free transit passes, do you want some? Which, I mean,
It was very
no.
kind of her. It was very nice.
Very kind, but it's not how they're supposed to be used, right? Because
Right.
that means someone's getting too many transit passes. And it is still a taxpayer subsidized service that we have to make sure that when we're handing out transit passes, they're going where they need to go and not going where they don't need to go. So I don't know if council wants to wait to talk to, I almost call him Councilor Graves, Mr. Graves, former Councilor Graves, or if you want to pass the motion and have them come anyway, and then get some information from staff. But to me, this doesn't have to happen right now, because we give them for the 26, 27 year, which is April 1st, so.
So you get a couple of options. You can table it, in which case it has to come back to the next meeting, which is on the 16th, or you can postpone it and we can pick a date and try to get Mr. Graves to come, or we can at least get the information before that date.
Okay. We have a mover and a seconder though, so what is,
But if we want to make a motion to postpone, we can do that right now. It has to be 2/3 vote. And then we can just postpone that. Let's say we decide to do it to the 23rd of March, and we can get the information before then.
Okay.
And maybe Mr. Graves can come and speak to council at that time.
okay, so it still doesn't impact the outcome, because we can get them before the end of the fiscal anyway,
Yep.
so is everyone good with that? Can I have a motion to postpone?
To the 23rd.
Councillor Wynot, seconded by Councillor Frazier. All those in favor? Unanimous. Those opposed? Thank you. So we'll ask Mr. Graves to come to the next meeting. That would be helpful. Thank you. Down 10.1, strategic priorities. That is acting CAO.
Okay. Just getting my presentation up here.
This is where the Jeopardy theme song should be playing.
Okay, so I put the package together. It's a summary of last week's discussion session. The information that's presented in the briefing note actually packages the information in 3 different ways. It packages it in terms of service enhancements, organizational enhancements, and strategic and transformational priorities. That's one way you see in the briefing note. It's also packaged in the CAO's format, where she has it grouped by which organization, which department is responsible, and sort of what the timelines are in those. And that's Appendix A in the briefing note. And then it also packages in terms of a work plan, which is what I'm going to just go over real quick here today. So next slide. So the box that's gray shows the mandatory that we've either got a contract or we've committed to legislatively, and those 7 issues, I'm just going to go through them real quick for your recollection and make sure that we're literally all on the same page. Asset management, the aim is to have a 3-year roadmap at the end of this year. EDI, we're going to work on our internal plan with our new internal committee. Housing action plan, of course, we just discussed that, and so that is a strategic item that's been on the council's agenda for the last couple of years. So if there's any changes to that, may need some direction tonight for that. But otherwise, as it's written, is to proceed with the housing action plan, and based on the motion that council just made, I think we're good to proceed on that. Recreation museum integration, that's an ongoing effort to improve the community facility at the Des Brisets building and increase community engagement, and there's some consultation coming up on that. Marketing levy, if you recall, last week our economic development officer presented a couple of options, and council supported the option to fund the marketing levy position for almost a 2-year pilot plan once we get somebody hired, and that will be fully funded by the marketing levy. So at the end of that 2-year, we can reevaluate and we can decide whether we want to continue to do that or do it a different way. Energized Bridgewater is transitioning. They're completing their current project at the end of March, and they'll be transitioning to a regional service by the end of September. And then development charges, that's an ongoing effort to figure out how our developments are going to pay for itself in the future. So those are the mandatory ones that we're going to stay the course on. The 9 strategic priorities, as you recall: wastewater capacity strategy, that's going to give us a clear path forward to for how we manage our treatment and collection of wastewater. Tax rate stability, lots of discussion on this one. This is not such a wide-ranging topic. This is really about looking at our operational efficiency and review of fees and how we use that to try to make ourselves more sustainable. Wastewater utility, you recall that we did talk about the scope of that being to determine the feasibility for the wastewater utility. So that'll be the next step before we actually talk about whether or not we're going to do further studies on the wastewater utility. Park planning and development, the aim is to come back with a council-approved plan by the end of the year. Business park expansion, it's come under a couple of different names: tax-based diversification, Exit 12A. This is going to be looking primarily at land marketing and sales for the next year or so, and continuing to diversify that tax base and figure out how to invest smartly with Exit 12A. Regional growth management, that is something that is really starting to take on a life of its own. It's currently really focused on transit and expanded transit, as well as 12A development. Specifically the new potential for a substation. But it also could include things like wastewater infrastructure, and we've got some preliminary work going on with Jubilee that talks to that particular issue, as well as economic development and potentially even water in the regional growth plan. But that's a plan that needs to come back to council at the end of the year. Priority 7 is the downtown growth plan, and that's an aim to have that downtown growth plan by the end of the year. Public transit expansion, as I mentioned, we're working on an agreement with Modal, and that's it's exciting, but there's also lots of work to do, and we need to go to the Review and Appeals Board to see if that will if there's any problems with that, and we'll come back with a plan by the end of the year. And then the item that you lifted back into our strategic plan was bylaw enforcement, and the issue that we agreed to there was to actually define what we were looking for in terms of bylaws, and then articulate that so that we can have a better understanding by the middle of this year. So those are the strategic priorities that we talked about last year, or last week. The full presentation is available in the discussion session online, and what I'm looking for tonight is direction from council to proceed with putting that all of that work into our budget assumptions so that we can move forward with our budget planning. I wanted to take any questions.
Questions of the acting CIO? Hearing none, someone prepared to make one. Councillor Cowell.
I move that, excuse me, I move that town council for the town of Bridgewater direct the CAO to incorporate the strategic priorities as presented in document 26-031A dated March 9th, 2027 into the budget plan for 26-27.
Yeah, we're just going to change it to March 9th, 2026 into the budget
Right.
plan for 26.
Yes.
Right? We're all like Ron Burgundy. You gotta watch it.
I would have read anything.
Find out in 2 weeks. All right, we have a mover to have a seconder, please. Councillor Newell, all those in favor? Those opposed, motion is carried. Oh, I said it, now it's gonna be me. 10.2, that's one of the additions that we had, South Shore Transition House Association extension of the MOU. So, as discussed in a previous council meeting, we had a memorandum of understanding that we entered into with South Shore Transition House Association to do some data collecting on a piece of property that they were looking to purchase, and so they are asking for an extension to May 11th. Just looking for council if they have any questions, comments, or someone wants to put a motion on the floor. Councillor Frazier.
Just bear with me. I think I clicked on the wrong thing here. I move that Town Council for the Town of Bridgewater approve the extension of the Memorandum of Understanding with South Shore Transition House Association to May 11th, 2026 with respect to PID number 60023298 and defer consideration of other expressions of interest for this property until a presentation is received from South Shore Housing Transition, South Shore Transition House Association.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Caldwell. Can I just ask for some clarification? So the MOU is going to be extended to May 11th, but defer consideration of other expressions of interest to this property until a presentation is received. Like, we should probably set a rough time for that, because what I wouldn't want is a presentation to be received in September. I'm assuming that we're all on the same page, that shortly after May 11th, we would receive a presentation, but I don't know if we need to, receive a presentation before the end of May?
If I may.
You may.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My apologies. For clarification.
That's why there's no fuzzy thing on the end.
My apologies. For clarification, the South Shore Transition Housing Association has asked for an extension to May 11th, specifically to be able to present to council. That is a council meeting. The objective would be able to present to you their proposal for consideration for that York Street property.
Okay.
So it is not to continue it with an extension beyond that. It is in May, picking the May 11th, that is the end of the extension, and that they would be here before council to present their findings and the proposal.
Okay, that's helpful for me. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Is May 11th sufficient then? I mean, not that, I'm sure you don't have 15 people at your door, but if they presented on May 11th and somebody came to you with a purchase and sales agreement on the 12th, they've presented to us but not been given time?
In the process to entertain other, for clarification, what if another proponent wanted to look at the York Street property and approach us?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the May 11th is that's the time frame in which the extension of the MOU is in place. Your agreement is that you would not entertain an expression of interest from another party prior to that time frame. A purchase and sale agreement proposal is actually something we step into after an expression of interest has been received. So an application can come forward expressing that they're interested in that particular parcel, very much like what the South Shore Transition Housing Association just did with us in saying, we're interested in this, may we take an opportunity for a period of time to assess the site, look at our options, and then come back to you. So we would not be in a position, the May 11th deadline means you're taking a position that you will not entertain another proposal from another proponent before that date.
Right.
Thereafter,
All bets are off.
Yeah.
thereafter, again, on the May 11th, should you receive a presentation from this proponent, the South Shore SSTHA, and they request an opportunity to enter into a purchase and sale agreement, you would have that as an option for yourselves based on that conversation. But at that point, should you decide you'd like to continue to expand your options, you're certainly within your capacity to do so. Entertaining another expression of interest, etc.
Yes,
Clear that?
thank you.
Yep, perfect. Good. Yeah, same. Okay, we have a mover and a seconder. Any other questions? Hearing none, all those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Down to notice, we're giving notice for changes to the Personnel Policy and Procedures Manual. I don't know if you want to just super
I mean,
briefly.
if the Director of Finance wants to come up and speak to it, or I can speak to it.
It's just giving notice. So you just have to
Yeah.
be very brief because this will come back, so.
Yeah. So this is a notice that we're going to realign the, when CPI is taken for the town so that it will make it easier for financial forecasting purposes. So the aim here is to realign the CPI to December rather than the end of February.
Right, perfect. we'll have a more robust discussion in a couple weeks when this comes back to council. But someone prepared to make a motion?
Sure.
Thank you.
I move that town council for the town of Bridgewater give notice pursuant to section 48 of the Municipal Government Act that at the March 23rd, 2026 council meeting, council will consider amendments to the Personnel Policies and Procedures Manual with respect to section 7.6 CPI as outlined in document number 26-034 dated March 9th, 2026.
Thank you. Seconded by Councilor Bashir. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Our last item is the Lunenburg County Senior Safety Program February report. You should have noted at the beginning when we were doing announcements that tomorrow at the Bridgewater Legion from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Is a tax clinic. Be held at the Legion. It is free. So it is it's called the CRA Income Tax Super Clinic. They've got a couple of volunteers remaining a table at the event, and they'll be sharing some information about the Lunenburg County Senior Safety Program as well there. Again, this is a vital service that we share with District of Lunenburg, Chester, Mahone Bay, and the town of Lunenburg. Seniors are being targeted so heavily with frauds and scams that I can't imagine the monetary value of money that this group, these folks have saved the seniors in the community from falling victim to. It's just, so it's something that we're going to hear more from around the council table, especially as funding programs are being impacted. There is probably going to be a future request for additional funding around the region for this, so stay tuned. And we are now at the end of our agenda, and again, appreciate staff. Evan left, but appreciate Evan's presentation, again, to the citizens that came out and spoke. I know that they didn't get the answer they wanted, but I cannot say how important it is for council to have people expressing themselves, so I appreciate them coming out. Can I please have a motion to adjourn? 2/3 of this side, so Councilor Bergier, Councilor Newell, we are adjourned. Thank you.